Welcome to the podcast. This week we will discuss protests in Afghanistan, a new extreme anti-abortion law in Texas which was condemned by UN experts, and lastly a proposal in the Netherlands to cut livestock numbers drastically in order to reduce ammonia pollution. In Afghanistan, the Taliban has tightened their crackdown on protests against their rule in the country. Last Wednesday, they formally banned protests that do not have official approval for the gathering and slogans that are used during the event. In recent weeks, many demonstrations ended in violent and sometimes lethal confrontations between the protesters and the Taliban fighters, like last Tuesday in the city of Herat, where 2 people were shot dead. The same day, in the capital Kabul, hundreds protested outside the Pakistan embassy, chanting "We want freedom," but were quickly dispersed by armed Taliban forces. Journalists covering these protests have also been abused by the Taliban. In the press, photos emerged of 2 journalists reporting from the events of Wednesday in Kabul, who got arrested and badly beaten up by Taliban fighters. Often women are at the forefront of these protests against Taliban rule. On Wednesday, women protested in Kabul and in the province of Badakhshan against the newly formed Taliban government, which has no female members, contrary to earlier announcements made by the Taliban about planning to include women in the new government. These protests were also broken up by armed forces, with many women injured in the violent crackdowns. The U.S. state of Texas was strongly condemned by United Nations human rights monitors for its new extremely anti-abortion law. This is the most radical abortion law in the United States, with a near total ban of abortions that, according to UN experts, violates international law by endangering the lives of women and denying them control over their own bodies. The law that has gone into effect 2 weeks ago bans abortion from the time when embryonic cardiac activity is detected, which is around 6 weeks into the pregnancy. It doesn't offer any exceptions even in cases of rape and incest. This 6-week period is so short that many women are not even aware of the pregnancy at that time, and means that up to 90% of all procedures are expected to be blocked by the new law in Texas. The law also gives chance to private citizens to sue abortion providers who violate it, which has led many abortion physicians to stop offering services in the fear that they would have to face costly lawsuits in the future. And with the new legislation, many women will be forced to seek abortion services out of state, which requires extra resources such as time, money, means of transport, and in some cases childcare. Melissa Preti, the chair of the UN's Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, has harshly criticized the legislation to The Guardian, calling it structural sex and gender-based discrimination at its worst. She fears that abortion providers could be forced underground, and women would have to seek unsafe procedures which endanger their lives. In the Netherlands, politicians are now considering plans to cut livestock numbers by almost a third in the country in order to reduce ammonia pollution. This would mean that many farmers could be forced to sell livestock by the government. The country has been taking radical steps to reduce pollution in recent years. The highest Dutch administrative court ruled in 2019 that the government had not been doing enough to reduce excess nitrogen in vulnerable natural areas and therefore had been violating EU law. After, speed limits for the daytime on motorways have been reduced to 100 km per hour, and now the government is focusing on agricultural reforms. The livestock industry in the Netherlands is one of the largest in Europe, and the country is the EU's biggest meat exporter. The plans to cut livestock numbers by 30% are the most radical of their kind in Europe and are supported by environmentalist groups for that. However, many are strongly opposed, and farming groups have already protested against similar government proposals by blocking roads with tractors. Environmentalists also warn that such issues should be regulated within the whole of Europe. Otherwise, farmers can just move to another country and keep continuing to contribute to ammonia pollution. This is the end of the podcast for this week. Thank you for listening.